Hey everyone, welcome to Heralds of War. I'm Clint, and today we're going to be talking about this wondrous book, The Legions of Nagash Battle Tome. I say it's wondrous. Death players have been waiting for a little while to get something like this, and I don't think we should be disappointed. It's awesome. There is a bit of complaining about certain things online, but I don't think that's anything to really worry about. So the whole point of today, I'll be going through this quick discussion about the lore, the new little tidbits and things like that that's in it, the new unit lore for things like the new named Dragon Rider, going through the allegiance abilities and picking out a few hot tips on command traits and abilities and things like that. And then I'll go through the Warscrolls and talk about what's changed and what stayed the same. So what I'm going to do, so you don't have to look at me the whole time, is I'm going to switch over to my trusty PDF of this book, so that you can see on the electronic version of the book, the digital version, and kind of follow along with what I'm talking about. So I'm just going to do that now. Okie dokie. So here we have, let's just make this full screen, hey? Yep, cool. Okie dokie. So this new book, it's pretty amazing. It's got loads of background about the lands of Shyish and how that works, and the way that death magic works and what's happened to Nagash since the end of the world that was. Basically, he gets found by Sigmar in a can, becomes part of Sigmar's pantheon, bides his time, and then screws people over. And if you've heard of that before, it's basically what he used to do in the old world. You can read about that a little bit more in the book yourself. There's some cool little bits and pieces when it's talking about how the realms of Shyish work. So there's a place called the Prime Innerlands, which is basically the center of the realm, central area of the realms, and basically the living and the dead kind of cohabitate, however you'd like to say that. Well done. And they coexist and get along, and people are kind of working alongside their ancestors and things like that. And then you get out a little bit more. There's a little mention of a paragraph of a place called Garnost or something. Garnost, yep. Where they're actually quite terrified of the sounds of approaching corpse carts, because that means that the corpse carts are going to go through the slums and things like that, picking up recruits in quotation marks, and taking them off and adding them to their undead like workforces and things like that, which is pretty cool. It sort of gives you, it's like, when people are talking about, ordinary folks living in the realm of death, that's pretty much what I think a lot of us assumed it would be. So you actually have some folks who are living together peacefully with their dead counterparts and things like that. Now, during the Age of Chaos, that all got smashed to pieces, unfortunately, and Nagash has kind of been working the last couple of 100 years, I think the timeline is up to kind of bring it back to where it was. But he's also working on a bit of a plan. I don't want to go too much into that. It's mentioned a little bit in this book, and that's pretty much the whole subject of malign portents. So that's kind of a topic for another show. So basically, the way that they've broken this book out, both in the lore and in the rules, is Nagash, and he has 3 legions made up of his Mortarchs, the big ones that have models already. So you have the Legion of Night, Legion of Sacrament, and Legion of Blood. And so Nagash uses these legions for different purposes. So you have the Neferata's Legion of Blood. He uses them when he needs, like, towns and cities in different realms corrupted with the Soulblight curse, and he needs spies and things like that in, you know, the upper crust of society. A little bit if you're from like the old Warhammer Fantasy background, that's what Lamians used to do. They used to set up these intricate networks of, you know, women in high places kind of thing, and feed back information to Neferata. And that's pretty much what's happening now. And she's then passing it on up the line to Nagash. You have Manfred's Legion of the Night, which he uses, which Nagash uses Manfred whenever he needs some sort of ambush or cunning attack, or you know, some sort of cunning plan where Manfred's natural deviousness comes into play. And so that's what he uses them for. They're basically his terror troops, I guess you could say, his strike force. And then Arkan, who's obviously his most loyal and his most trusted Mortarch, he and his Legion of Sacrament are kind of, I suppose, Nagash's Indiana Jones kind of thing, off searching for artifacts, for preservation, and any sort of secret or sensitive missions. Nagash gets Arkan to use, gets Arkan to do that for him, or one of Arkan's disciples and things like that. So that's kind of how the book is split up, and it talks about the different Mortarchs. They've all kind of gone off and done their own thing. You know, Neferata has recreated Lamia as new Lamia, and that, you know, from what she remembers, Manfred's got Carstinia, which is kind of like a little piece of the old world, but how he would have liked it. It's kind of a double-edged sword for him, because one, he never got to rule over the old one, so there's a bit of melancholy there. But also he gets to rule over this one, and he quite enjoys that. And then Arkan kind of sticks around the Black Pyramid that Nagash is rebuilding, and looks after that. Now, so we've got in the book, as well as a bit of lore, there's some cool little timelines. Basically, there's a bunch of things there about Nagash getting snapped by Archaon, unfortunately, during the end of the Age of Myth. And then there's a little bit more as they come through. Sort of the second page is a bit more recent. There's a little one there called Into Darkness, which I quite like, which is Arkan sending one of his disciples and an army into the realm of shadows to figure out what's happening with Slaanesh, because Slaanesh has absorbed obviously all the elf souls, and Nagash doesn't like anyone touching his souls. So he gets Arkan to send various little envoys into the realm of shadows, and it talks about them being spied on and stuff as they're going into this realm. So that's pretty cool. There's some little ones that talk about the new character, Prince Vordrai. Basically, there's the Sons of Malice, Stormhost. They're leading an army of flagellants to retake a citadel, reconsecrate it, and basically the Crimson Keep, which is Prince Vordrai's keep, appears, and all of a sudden there's loads of Blood Knights, and the Sigmarites get a bit frightened by that. And then there's another story. I can't do this without talking about a Manfred story. People who know me will know that. And this little one's called Lost in the Mire. And basically talks about him being chased by a Nurgle army deeper and deeper into the swamp, and all of a sudden tons of zombies come up, bog down the Nurgle forces, and then Manfred comes in and, you know, shows them what for, basically doing that ambush countercharge type tactics that he's known for. Rightio. So that's the timeline. We've got also in the book, we've got little discussions about, you know, little bits of lore on the different units, which you get in a battle tome. You'll be fairly familiar with. Nagash's story hasn't changed an awful lot, and So we've got some lovely art of him there. I'm just trying to find. So basically it goes through the different Mortarks and what they're doing now. I've kind of covered that off just a little bit. Some great bits of artwork here of the Morghasts and Arkan. Sorry, I'll just wait for the thing to catch up with me. There we are. Okay. So, and then we talk about Soulblight vampires. Now, I've stopped here to talk specifically about Prince Vordry, who, when sort of Warscrolls leaked a couple of weeks ago, and people were like, oh my gosh, it's a new character. I wonder if he'll get a new model. He's just a dude on a zombie dragon with a specific kit out, but his story is quite cool. Basically, during the assault by Archaon, and after Archaon defeats Nagash and smashes his physical form into not very many pieces and things like that, Prince Vordry decided that he would get rid of Nagash at that point by shoving what was left of him through a realm gate into the realm of chaos and just letting the chaos gods just eat Nagash, which I think it's a good plan, except Arkan, being the teacher's pet, found out, stopped it happening, and then put Vordry in a coffin for thousands of years. And then once Nagash was resurrected, he has tied Prince Vordry to his former castle, Crimson Keep. So he can take the keep wherever he wants to within the realms, the different realms, as long as there's sufficient death magic. But if he goes too far away from the keep, he'll die, which is it's an interesting little story. And it shows that Nagash can definitely hold a grudge, and that Arkan, as I said before, is a bit of a teacher's pet. So the other new sort of unit, which I think is a bit of a, well, we all know it's a bit of a kit bash of the Coven Throne. Where are we? Is the Bloodseeker Palanquin. So these are basically, it's a vampirus, or a vampire, I suppose. It doesn't really, I don't think, talk about the actual gender of them, but it's them on a carriage with a oh, goodness, mind blank, with a big bowl of blood. And what they do is that they inspire the other Soulblight vampires around them to greater feats of bloodlust, and basically get them worked up, I suppose you could say. So everything else is pretty much the same. They haven't changed too much since the Grand Alliance Death Book. There's little bits of fluff in there about everything, and let's face it, you should really read this book for yourself. I just wanted to cover off a few different things. Okay, so now we're going to get into the meat of the matter, which is the actual Warscrolls and allegiance abilities and things like that. So in this book, there are 6 allegiances. So you have the Grand Host of Nagash, which obviously represents Nagash's army. You have a legion for each of the Mortarks. So you have Sacrament, Night, and Blood. GW have also put a revised Soulblight allegiance ability set in here as well, and a revised Death one. So there are little tweaks to those two, which we'll go over at the end of the other allegiances. But really, I just want to talk about the new stuff mainly. So as you can see here, I should have, yep. Okay, so the Grand Host of Nagash. So all of the new allegiance abilities, all of the new ones, that is, not revised. So the Host of Nagash and the 3 legions of Sacrament, Night, and Blood, they have a couple of things common across all of them. So they have the battle trait Unquite Dead, which is which is the grave sites that people have talked about. So you get to put 2 counters in your territory, 2 grave counters. They don't talk about size, but it's really just a point, and then you can use whatever you want to represent them. So you put 2 in your territory and 2 anywhere else on the battlefield. Now, you use these to help you bring in units through the game. So summonable units, which is a new keyword, you can kind of put aside under the ground, so to speak, and then sort of at the end of your movement phase, any of the movement phases really, a death hero that's close enough to one of these grave sites, 9 inches away, can elect to use the grave site, and bring up a summonable unit that you've put aside earlier in the game. So that unit has to come up wholly within 9 inches, wholly. So units of 40 skeletons are going to be fun to try and do that. I haven't measured it out, but I imagine that will be tough. And they also have to be 9 inches away from enemy models. So a savvy player, a savvy opponent, is just going to put stuff next to your grave sites if you load them up in their territory, and so you can bring on your summonable units that way. If they're still under the ground in the grave, so to speak, at the end of the game, they count as slain. And any models that you can't put in within that 9 inches die as well. So if you try, a unit of 40 or something like that, and there's 3 that can't fit in that wholly within 9, they'll just die. And also, these grave sites have the rule Invigorating Aura. So basically, at the start of your hero phase, you pick a summonable unit within 9 inches of the grave site, and they heal D3 wounds, or you can return a number of models that have a combined wounds characteristic, more on that later, equal to the roll of your D3. So you can heal D3 wounds back to like a big monster or something like that. Oh no, if it's summonable, you're talking spirit hosts or something like that. Or 3 individual sort of graveguard or skeletons or something. Or if you roll a 2 or a 3, you can bring back 1 single Black Knight. So it's worth noting that it says wounds characteristic, which means that if you roll a 3, it can be, a 3 wound model, which is a spirit host base, or 1 Black Knight. You don't get 1.5 back. There's been a bit of debate about that online already this weekend, but it quite clearly says characteristic. Okie dokie. So all of them have that, and they also have deathless minions. There are a few people concerned because there hadn't been any talk about deathless minions prior to, in the leaks or any of that in the book before the book was released. It's there. It's unchanged, I'm pretty sure, and all of the new legions get it. I'm talking too quickly, sorry. All these new hosts and legions also get a new command ability, which is called the Endless Legions. So you get to return a previously slain summonable unit to the battlefield wholly within 9 inches of a gravesite. So yes, you do need reinforcement points to do this. So there's, once again, it's been one of those things, debate online. Oh, I've already paid for the unit. It's not a new unit. Well, for the purposes of putting it on the table, it's a new unit. You have to pay for it. And so there's already been a bit of discussion online about how to best use this particular command ability and whether it's worthless or not. The important thing to remember is, A, 90% of the time, your general is going to have a different command ability anyway that you'll probably want to use more. And B, it's an option. It's another thing to put in your toolkit to have, some reinforcement points put aside. You send a unit in for a suicide mission, some Black Knights or something. You just go throw them in, kill an enemy hero or something. They get snapped. Oh, I've got the points aside to bring them back so I can run them to an objective later on or something. Yeah. So there is some use to it. I can see why people think it's a bit useless because you have to pay for it. But the days of anyone getting anything free are over, and we all just need to accept that. But I still think it's quite a cool little ability. Okay, so now on to the specific allegiances. So we'll start obviously with Big Daddy himself, with Grand Host of Nagash. Now, if basically it can include any unit in the battle tone. Basically, we'll get a Grand Host of Nagash allegiance if it's in this book. So that rules out things like I've seen the Sepulchral Stalkers, no, Sepulchral Guard from Shadespire have been sort of ruled out in that way, as well as Mourngals and things like that. But everything else in the book, you can take. If Nagash is in the list, he needs to be the general, which, let's face it, it makes sense. No more, having Nagash and Arkan being your general so you can 9-inch Hand of Dust things off. As fun as that is, Nagash is the big boss, and as such, he's the big boss when you make the army as well. Okie dokie. So all wizards in the Grand Host get an additional spell, and Nagash gets an extra 3. So that's pretty amazing, especially for Nagash, considering how many extra times he can cast in a turn. You're now going to be able to really take advantage of that. And he's definitely looking more and more worth the points that he currently is. Okie dokie. So there's another battle trait here. So yeah, we have Deathless Minions there. Okie dokie. So Chosen Guardians, which is +1 attack to Grand Host of Nagash Morghasts that are in your army. So Morghasts are already awesome with either 5 attacks with the 2 swords or 3 attacks with the halberds. You definitely can't go wrong with adding an extra attack to either of those. I think that's super duper strong and really quite awesome. And then you have the Legions Innumerable. So you roll a dice for each Grand Host of Nagash summonable unit on the battlefield. On a 5-up, you heal D3 wounds. So that is pretty cool. But so as on top of the Deathly Invocation, which we'll talk about in a moment, you also have the Legions Innumerable healing your units as well on a 5-up. So it's on a 5-up, still very good. It's free healing. Can't go wrong with that. And as I said, we've got that command ability, we've got Deathless Minions, and we go from there. Okay, so command traits. Now, each of these new allegiances have the 6 command traits that we're all pretty accustomed to. Some of them impress me and some of them don't. And now so I've kind of cherry picked a few for each allegiance that I think is really good, or at least really serviceable. And I'm going to go through them. And I know that people out there are going to be saying, Clint, you're an idiot. You've missed this one or this one or this one. That's fine. I've not played this with the book yet. I've read it a lot, but reading it doesn't always translate into practical experience. And we all know that I am not the best Warhammer player out there. So the command traits I like from this particular allegiance are Ancient Strategist, which is the reroll failed charge rolls for Death Rattle and Morghast units from the army that they're in 9 inches of general. Quite handy, because if you're taking a command trait, you're not taking Nagash or a named character, so you're probably taking a dude on Zombie Dragon or something like that that's up at the front of your army, or close to the front of your army. Therefore, that 9 inches probably isn't going to be as big a deal. And making sure that your other supporting units get into charge with you is going to be very important. There's nothing worse than sending your general in and then none of his support units coming in with him, and then your general dies. So this obviously gets around that. And also Bane of the Living is another one that I liked, which is rerolls of 1 to wound for the general. if he's attacking non-death units. So that's kind of cool. A lot of the good attacks with the kind of generals that you would put this on have a low to wound score. They're generally sort of 3s. Rerolling those 1s is just going to make sure that you actually get it through, and that's kind of handy. And artifacts. So the ones that I quite liked here were the Gravesand Time Glass. So all of these have really cool little names and descriptions and things like that. And all of the allegiances have some way of just doing mortal wounds to folks across the board. You pick a hero or do whatever. And in this particular one, once per battle, you pick an enemy hero on the battlefield, and the enemy suffers D3 mortal wounds. And then each of your subsequent hero phases, on a 4-up, they take more mortal wound, like another mortal wound. So you can kind of do that first, pick a hero, do D3 mortal wounds, and slowly whittle down this hero so that you have a fairly good chance of them not being alive at the end of the game, because the 4-up's fairly easy to get. And then we have the Ossific Diadem. And somebody's out there going, that's not how it's pronounced. But basically, this is the old White King banner, effectively. So it's a 6-up to negate wounds or mortal wounds on death rattle units within 12 inches of the bearer. So it's a really cool secondary item. If you've noticed that basically the Host of Nagash, there's a focus on death rattle. So you're going to have lots of skeletons and grave guard and things like that. So this is a very useful item to throw on a White King, hide him in the middle of all the skeletons or your grave guard or whatever, and just give them an additional chance to negate wounds. So 12-inch bubble for that is not bad at all. Okie dokie. And then from there, sorry, I've got 2 screens running just so I can have my notes and the chat and the book up all at once. So now we come on to the Legion of Sacrament, which is obviously Archon. I actually think this is the weakest of the new ones. I know that there are people I know, Josh from our local club, has just been working on lists with this allegiance to make sure that casting really works for him. It doesn't float my boat. That's not to say it's weak. I just think it's not as strong as some of the others. So in this particular allegiance, you can't take Nagash, which makes sense. And if you're going to take a Mortarch, it has to be Archon, which once again, that makes sense. Other than that, anything else in the book, which it becomes a theme of these new allegiances. You get an extra spell for the wizards within the Lords of Sacrament army, which is quite handy, because you have things like, you have folks like Archon who just know spells within 18 inches, and they can just suck up all the different spells that you want off their backup casters and things like that. You have the Master's Teachings here, which it's kind of like that Endless Legions command ability where you can bring stuff back, but basically when an enemy unit is destroyed, before you remove the last model, you pick a grave site that's within 6 inches, and then on a 4-up, you get to bring back a summonable unit that died earlier and set it up within 9 inches of that graveyard. So it's kind of like the command ability, but kind of not. It's a bit chancy. It's one of those things that if it goes off for you, that's pretty cool, but you definitely wouldn't try and build anything around it. And all of the friendly Legion of Sacraments wizards get 1 to their casting rolls. So that's kind of handy. Other than that, you've got the graveyard markers and deathless minions and things like that they all have. Okie dokie. So the command traits that sort of stuck out to me here are Mastery of Death. So at the start of your hero phase, all of the death units within 6 inches of the general get to move up to 3 inches. They don't get to run as part of that. But that's kind of handy. It's at the start of your hero phase, so they can just kind of all move away and get a bit closer to enemy models and things like that to cast spells and that kind of thing. It's just it's one of those cool little things that can, you know, take your opponent by surprise as stuff just starts moving towards them that little bit quicker. And the other one, which if you're going to make use of grave sites is pretty good, is Peerless Commander, which basically they get to use a grave site if they're within 12 inches of it instead of 9. So that's your general, obviously. So they can be a little bit further away from the action and still use those grave sites. So if you're building a list around bringing stuff up using the grave sites, that's kind of a good one as well. And then Bound to the Master. So if you were taking a not Archon in the list, which is why you're taking a command trait, but you really wanted Archon's command ability, Bound to the Master gives that to him. So yeah, Archon's command ability is extra casting range and things like that. So that's, yeah, it's one of those maybe ones for me, but it's still there. Okay, so Artifacts of Sacrament. Once again, some really cool names in here. You know, Spirit Cage, some callbacks to old items from, you know, 6th edition even, like the wristbands of black gold, which is basically being able to negate a wound or mortal wound in the shooting phase on a 4-up for the bearer of the item, which is kind of handy. If you want to protect stuff from shooting, you're making sure it's not getting into combat. You don't want it to get shot off. Can't go wrong with being able to roll 4s and negate some wounds. And then you have the Azirbane Standard, which is -1 to wound rolls from enemy units within 6 inches of the bearer. And you got to reroll successful casting from order wizards within 6 inches of the bearer as well. So that's kind of handy if you want to get stuck in, but you don't want to get retributed or something like that, you know, where, you know, wound rolls and things like that double out or turn into mortal wounds and things like that. So it's kind of handy. They've all, I think, got one that increases your hits and things like that. But these are just ones that kind of stuck out to me. Okay, so what have we got next? We have the Legion of Blood. So Neferata, this Legion, a lot of people are saying it's their favorite. But I think that's just what Neferata wants them to say. It's really strong, especially if you like Soulblight. If you like Blood Knights, this is you, pretty much. Doesn't give them to you as battle line, but makes them really good. And it's things like this particular allegiance is why Blood Knights didn't go up in cost, but that's another thing that we'll talk about later. Okay, so once again, can't have Nagash in this. If you're taking a Mortarch, it has to be Neferata, and she has to be the general. Same as Sacrament. Everybody, all the spells in the, all the wizards in the Legion of Blood get an extra spell. Which is kind of handy. They get the grave sites and things like that. They have the Favored Retainers rule, which is +1 to the melee weapons for friendly Legion of Blood Vampire Lords or Legion of Blood Blood Knights. So that makes your dude on Zombie Dragon, the Blood Knights, the dude on foot. I think the Coven Throne has the blood. Has the Vampire Lord keyword. Don't hold me to that until I check in my book beside me. Apologies. No, the Bloodseeker Palanquin doesn't. No, they don't have the Vampire Lord keyword. So, and you also have Immortal Majesty, which is -1 from -1 to enemy bravery within 6 inches of any friendly Legion of Blood units. So that's kind of handy when you stack it with the other banners and items and things like that. And then you can get some reasonably good bravery buffs, bravery debuffs happening with those particular battle traits and banners and things like that. I don't know, Michael. I can see you. Michael's just said in the chat, can you build your army as Soulblight allegiance and then choose allegiance blood allegiance abilities? I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head. My thought was that you can go. I think you can build a Soulblight army and choose death, but I'm not sure about Legion of Blood. I will come back to you on that. But sorry, slightly derailed. Command traits. Let's talk about command traits. So Aristocracy of Blood, which is once again re-rolling of charge rolls for Soulblight units within 9 inches of your general at the start of the charge phase. That's kind of, it's another one that's very similar to one I've picked earlier. It's kind of handy once again. If you're picking a command trait, especially in this particular allegiance with all of the bonuses to Vampire Lords and things like that, you are taking a dude on a Zombie Dragon and tons of Blood Knights to back him up, or, you know, Vampire Lords or whatever. So you definitely want to be able to reroll those charge rolls and make your offensive charge come off. And the other one that I quite like, which is kind of, I don't know, I seem to have picked lots of movement ones because I think movement is pretty important. And that is Sanguine Blur, which is add 2 inches to the movement characteristics and then reroll fail charge for the general. So that's kind of handy. There's also Aura of Dark Majesty, which is a bit of a callback to previous books, which is subtract hit 1 from hit rolls of attacks to target the general in the combat phase. So kind of a cursed book plus kind of thing. Okie dokie. And then artifacts. The artifacts of blood. So we've got, I quite like the Soulbound Garments, which is reroll save rolls of 1. That's not too bad. The Ring of Dominion is, it's situational. But basically, when you're selected to fight when you activate a model to fight in the combat phase, you pick an enemy model within 3 inches. On a 5-up, you get to pick one of their melee weapons and fight with that, as well as your other weapons. Could be quite fun, I guess. It's fairly situational. I don't think you'd want to pin your hopes on it too much, but it is there. And then one that I didn't have down, but then I was talking to Chris Welfare earlier today, and he's like, I really love this. And I read it again. And I'm like, yeah, I can see it being a secondary artifact if you're running a battalion or something. And I'm going to butcher this name. Obliate Arcana. So, yeah. That's just no, never mind. When an enemy wizard successfully casts a spell within 30 inches, you can use the thingy instead of attempting to unbind it. So basically, on a 6+, so you roll when you use this thing. On a 6-up, the spell's negated and has no effect, and then the wizard can now cast that spell again for the battle. So basically, it just says, no, you can't have. Oh, I'm sorry, Lord of Change hiding at the back. I'm going to use this. I'm not in unbind range, but I am within 30 inches. I'm going to try and use this. And on a 6-up, you can't use Gateway anymore or something like that. So it's kind of handy. Yeah, it's kind of one of those ones that you'd probably put on, you know, as a second artifact rather than the only one or a primary one. It's just a bit of fun there. So. Okay, so Legion of Night, Manfred's Legion. So automatically, I think it's amazing, just because Manfred's great. But no, I do think it's quite good, especially if you like movement shenanigans or ambushing and things like that. Sorry. Yep. So if you like to do movement shenanigans, if you're used to deep striking stuff in or whatever, this is possibly the Legion for you, because it matches that sort of built-in ambushy type style of Manfred. So once again, no Nagash. If you take a Mortark, it must be Manfred. He must be the general. You're used to that by now, but it's the last time I say it. You get an extra spell for the wizards within the Legion of the Night army. It has the grave sites and that kind of thing as well. Has a special rule called the bait. So, as you know, as we've already discussed, Manfred likes his ambushes and things like that. So he's always using skeleton units and things like that as the bait in his traps. So you get basically set them up as the baits in your territory. And you get +1 save rolls and death runner units, which I think is quite cool. Good for defensive blocks of skeletons. They can be a bit weak sometimes with, you know, only a 6-up save. But if they're getting, you know, if you've got a decent chunk of them sitting on an objective in your territory with this allegiance, they're going to have, you know, effectively a 5-up save plus whatever else you want to do with it. So that's kind of handy. They also have Ageless Cunning. So instead of setting up a unit, a Legion of the Night unit on the battlefield, you place it to one side and say it's going into ambush. So you can do this with up to 3 units. And at the end of any of your hero phase, you can set up one of the units from ambush wholly within 6 inches of the battlefield edge and more than 9 inches away from enemy models. So that's kind of handy. You can bring them on from a board edge that you need them the most, whether that be on the enemy side or even your side to, you know, reinforce your position or something like that. You've been taken surprise and there's enemies in your half of the board. Bam, bring them on your end. So that happens at the end of the movement phase. I quite like that. That's really cool. And because it doesn't specify summonable or anything like that, you know, I've seen people talking about, you know, ambushing terrorgeists and things like that. So that's pretty rough. Just to have a terrorgeist pop up behind you and eat you. It's got to ruin your day. Yeah, that's quite cool. On to command traits. So if you are going hardcore at the ambush theme, there's a great command trait called, whenever it catches up with me, there we go, Above Suspicion. So this general may be set up in ambush in addition to the 3 units allowed. So you can have 4 units in ambush if your general takes this command trait, one of them obviously being your general. So if you're, once again, I keep coming back to him, but the dude on a zombie dragon, you know, if that's behind your enemy lines in turn 1, they're going to have a bad time. So, yeah. But that then supported by other things behind them as well. It's pretty cool. I really like it. Once again, I've picked another movement command trait, which is add 2 to the movement characteristics of your general and add +2 to the movement when they run. It's kind of handy. You've got Merciless Hunter in there as well, which is reroll wound rolls of 1. It's kind of good as well. Okie dokie. And we'll go to artifacts. Now, I've picked sort of 2 from here. They are... Sorry, I'm just moving my notes around. The Vial of Pure Blood. So it's one of those, once per battle in your hero phase, you can declare that the bearer will drink from the vial. +1 to hit and +1 to wound for the bearer. So that's kind of handy if you desperately want to smack something about in one phase, or you're doing some sort of alpha strike kind of deal. Yeah, it's a bit... You only get it for 1 turn, but +1 to hit and +1 to wound can't be wrong. Then you have Morheg's Claw. Morbheg's Claw. Sorry, I don't have my glasses on. In your hero phase, the bearer decides to use the claw. Basically, they then don't get to move, charge, or attack this turn, but they then have +2 to casting rolls of Legion of Night Wizards within 12 inches. So you have this on a secondary dude, and he goes, righto, I'm going to give everybody around me +2 to cast, and we're going to make sure that this stuff happens. It's kind of cool, kind of useful. Once again, it's one of those sort of secondary sort of items that are kind of handy to have on a necromancer or a wraith or a white king or something. And then you could also, the curse blade is quite good as well. We talked about, items that just kind of do random mortal wounds across the field. This is one of them. So the curse blade, after you've set up, but before you start playing, first battle round, you pick an enemy hero, and then in your hero phases, as long as that hero is still on the battlefield, on a 4-up, they take a mortal wound, and then you heal a wound. So that's kind of just like just chipping away at old mate across the other side of the field, and then you're kind of healing as well. It's not super good, but I think it's quite useful. Once again, one of those secondary sorts of items. So, okie dokie. And now we take a break from allegiances to talk about the magic laws. So, it's death. We love magic. It's an army all about magic. But we haven't had our own magic laws for ages. That's changed, and now we have 2. Which is pretty good. So you've got the Death Mages and the Law of Vampires. So Death Mages, Death Mages get to take that law, and Vampires get to take the Law of Vampires. And if they're a Death Lord Wizard, Nagash, Arkan, etc., they get to pick both. So very cool, very cool. We also have like a little law attribute, kind of the Locus of Shaiish. So basically, if a spell is cast by a wizard in your army on an unmodified 9, so the dice read 9 or more, then you get to resolve the effects of the spell twice. So that's kind of awesome, because there was lots of discussion initially, I think, when they had it on the community site about with Nagash having +3 to cast, it's going to happen all the time. But no, it's unmodified. It's not going to happen every day. You've got a good chance of doing it. If you throw in the dice, would just be amazing. They really are interesting spells, and they don't kind of look like they set the world alight. But if they resolved twice on a unit, then yeah, it's pretty good. Okay, so I've picked a couple of spells from each of the laws that I want to talk about. The first one is Overwhelming Dread. Now, it's from the Law of Death Mages. Cast on a 5, so it's super easy to get off. pick an enemy unit within 18 inches that you can see, and until your next hero phase, -1 to hit and -1 from their bravery characteristic. So but there's lots of stuff that deals with adding negatives to bravery characteristics in the Death Army now. Kind of like old school fear, I guess you could say, which is really quite cool. So, -1 to hit and -1 bravery is definitely nothing to be sniffed at on a 5-up. And so that's really cool. Fading Vigor is once again 6-up to cast. Once again, you got to be able to see them, a range of 18 inches. And until your next hero phase, subtract 1 from the attacks characteristics of that unit's melee weapons to a minimum of 1. You can't take away all their characteristics, all their attacks, unfortunately. And they only get to roll a single dice when they charge. So that's pretty rough on some sort of offensive units. If you can if you think you're going to get charged by this unit in the next turn and they're going to do some horrific damage, try and get this off on them. They might not be able to get that charge in. And if they do, they're not going to be as effective in combat, so it's quite good. It's very similar to the old, I think it was called Spirit Blight on Vampire Lords in the old Grand Alliance Death book. I really liked that spell. Removing an attack, combat attack from some units is just super good. And the third one I picked from the Death Mages was Decrepify. Now, not only has it got a really cool name, it's a cool spell. That's why I've picked it. So 6-up to cast, pick an enemy hero within 18 inches of the caster that you can see. And until your next hero phase, -1 from wound rolls and -1 from damage. So that's to a minimum of 1. So for the damage one. So that's kind of cool. Once again, if they're going to get through, you don't want them to wound you as much or do as much damage. So that's kind of handy. That's what I like from the Death Mages. That's not to say that the other ones there aren't great. They just didn't stand out to me as much. Things like Soul Harvest are a bit iffy because they've got a 3-inch range, and Death Mages are quite squishy. So you don't want them in combat. And Death Lords probably have access to other things that you wouldn't, so you wouldn't take Soul Harvest. Okay, Lore of Vampires. What did I like here? I liked Vile Transference. It's really cool. Casting value of 7. You pick an enemy unit within 12 that you can see, and then a death unit within 6 inches of that enemy unit. So the way I've read that is you don't need to be able to see the death unit, and they don't need to be within 12 inches. So you can pick a unit that's an enemy unit's within 12 inches of you, and if they're in a long line, and there's a death unit that's within 6 inches at the other end of that line, you can pick that death unit. So basically, the enemy unit suffers D3 mortal wounds, and for each of those wounds that end up being allocated and not negated by the enemy, so basically they actually take them after you have all the saves and all that sort of stuff, you get to put one of those wounds back onto that friendly unit. So you're sucking the vitality out of the enemy and giving it to your other troops. It's kind of handy. And it's a 7. It's still pretty decent to cast and quite a good spell. Amethystine Pinions. So casting value of 5. Basically cast it on yourself. And if you successfully cast it, you add 5 to the move characteristics and you can fly. A lot of the big heroes can fly anyway, but if you cast it on something that can't fly, it's a bit of a surprise. And additionally, moving 5 inches, and you might have some of the other command traits that I've talked about where you already have, an extra 2 inches, or you've moved 3 inches in the hero phase or something like that, and all of a sudden, you've moved an extra 8 inches plus whatever you are doing normally, and you're in their face turn 1. It's quite handy. And lastly, Soul Pike. So casting value of 6, an enemy unit within 18 that you can see. Basically, until your next hero phase, after a unit affected by any Soul Blight spells makes a charge move, so obviously it doesn't stack, not that you can cast it more than once, roll a number of dice equal to the result of their charge roll. So that if they get +3 to their charge roll or whatever, you include all those modifiers and then roll that number of dice, and for each 5, the unit takes a mortal wound. So yeah, so that's kind of handy if you know that something's going to charge, and they have bonuses to charge. Corn units stick out here. You know, they're always getting plus this to their charge, or plus whatever, and rolling 3 dice and standing on their heads while they charge and whatever. That's kind of a good spell because you might be able to take out a bunch of them before they even get to attack you. Yeah, so we've got somebody in the chat here that's mentioned that a 24-inch moved zombie dragon is quite good. Yeah, if you cast Amethystine Pinions on an unmodified 9+, you get to do it twice, so you get +10. That's, yeah, I hadn't spotted that, but yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty tasty. That nobody is going to have a good time with that unless it's you, pretty much. Yeah, I like it. Okay, so we'll back to allegiance abilities. Right, yeah. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to have a drink. Right, yeah. Soul Blight. So this obviously replaces the Soul Blight allegiances in the General's Handbook 2017. So they have given it's very similar. They've given all the wizards in a Soul Blight army an extra spell from the Lore of Vampires, which is quite cool. So they've given them access to the spell lore. And what else have they done? They have renamed one of the command traits. Number 2 command trait. Now it's called Deathless Duelist, and it used to be called Dreadnought, which is reroll hit rolls of 1 if they're attacking an enemy hero. I think they just renamed it. I'm pretty sure. But yeah, the rest of it, I think, is all the same. The rest of the command traits are fine. The bloodlines are the same. The artifacts are the same. What they've done is they've tightened up some of the wording on the artifacts. Well, actually, they've tightened up the wording on stuff all throughout the book. So, once upon a time, things would say, if you inflict wounds, or if you do this, or, wounds inflicted or whatever. Now they talk about wounds allocated. It's all through the book. So that's clearly them tightening up their language because of the way that damage gets worked out and inflicting, and then you get negated. And so, yeah, so it's interesting to see that they've tightened up a lot of that wording, not just through the revised stuff, but throughout the whole book. They're all very much the same. So if you've ever looked at a General's Handbook 2017 in the Soul Blight section, it's pretty much the same. Cool. Death, they don't get access to the spell lore, which is interesting. I thought they might just give them access, but I think if you want to run a general death army, you can do that in a Grand Host without too much issue. You still have your deathless minions. You still have access to artifacts. You still have access to command traits. And you don't have to take Nagash. So I think they've revised the death one in case people, I don't know, they want to use the old command traits and the old abilities. What they have done, though, is they've adjusted the sword in the artifacts. So it used to be called the Sword of Unholy Power, which was a bit confusing because Manfred also had the same sword, same named sword, but they did 2 different things, which is always helpful. So they now called it the Blade of Dark Summons. And instead of just automatically summoning a unit, which obviously that's not how it works anymore, you get to set up a summonable death unit wholly within 12 inches of the bearer and more than 3 inches away from enemy models. And you add that to your army, and the models in the unit must have a combined wounds characteristic of no more than a 2d6 roll. So you can get really lucky and can get 10 skeletons, or you can get 2 skeletons. So that is a bit rough. I'd have liked to have seen that be, 2d6 or 5, whichever is higher, or something like that. But that's added complications, and they probably figured people aren't going to be using these as much now, unless you are a Tomb Kings player, really, because unfortunately, Tomb Kings players, this is all that's in the book for you. You don't get anything else. This is your bit. This is all you get. So I can see why possibly they've revised it and left it back in. Cool. So we go from here, and now I'm going to talk about some of the battalions and the war scrolls. So you're going to have to just put up with me getting us there in the book. There we go. And then that'll catch up in a second. So once again, Death Players got what we've been asking for. We got a couple of battalions. Now, as you can imagine, from the rest of the structure of the book, they're tied very closely to Nagash, the Mortarchs, and that kind of structure, which is fine. Like that's clearly how they've decided this army is going to work now. So we have here Nagash's formation, the first cohort. So he obviously has to be in it. Then you have a unit of Morghasts, and then 3 or more units chosen from Skeleton Warriors, Graveguard, and Black Knights. So in a grand host of Nagash, Graveguard, Morghasts, and Skeleton Warriors are all battle line. So you can quite easily do this with some good battle line units. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Let's face it, Morghasts aren't anything to sniff at. Neither are Graveguard at the moment. So the special rules that this little battalion gives you is the Ceaseless Vigil, which is basically when Nagash takes wounds, you can pick a Morghast unit within 3 inches of him from this battalion, and on a 3-up, you get to flick that wound to the Morghast. So basically, it's very similar to what the Necromancers had. But so you would take a save, or Nagash's mortal wound save, and then a Deathless Minions, and then you would see if you could flick it, and then the Morghasts get to make their saves as well. Actually, no, I will rephrase that, because you have to allocate it. So that's after the save step, I believe. So the Morghasts just have to take it on the chin. The other rule there is Eternal Servitude. So when Nagash uses his Deathly Invocation ability to heal some of your summonable units, you just assume he has rolled a 3 for his D3 rolls. So it's very good at keeping stuff topped up. So obviously the summonable units from this battalion are going to be your Skeleton Warriors, your Graveguard, or your Black Knights if you take them. So being able to just pop 3 wounds worth of stuff back to each of those units is very good, because you know that you can rely on that being a 3. But obviously, Nagash has got a big old target on himself, and being able to flick wounds to the Morghasts is going to be handy there, because they're not short of a wound or 2. And the Death Battalions, I'm not going to go into specific points. It's where people get into trouble. But the battalions in the Death book are surprisingly cheap for what they do. This one is the mid. It's more than 100, but less than 200. Sort of in the middle there. It's quite good. I don't think it's bad. A bad formation, bad battalion. Sorry. Then on to the Lords of Sacrament, which is Arkan's one. So as you'd expect from Arkan, it's all about casting, and his little helpers within this battalion are, so it's Arkan, 2 or more necromancers, and a mortis engine. And so the battalion revolves around the mortis engine a lot. So in your hero phase, each wizard from this particular battalion gets to cast an additional spell while they're within 6 inches of the mortis engine. So, you have a necromancer who'll know, 3 or 4 spells, can normally only cast 1, gets to cast 2, and he gets +1 from being in the Legion of Sacrament as well. So that's kind of handy. Means you can make use of all these spells that they know while they're close to that mortis engine. And being necromancers and things like that, they're not going to stray too far from being, safe. Then the other one is Swirling Spirits. So in the shooting phase, you add 1 of the save rolls for the units from this battalion if they're within 6 inches of that mortis engine. So once again, you can kind of use the mortis engine to protect your necromancers and also make them a lot better at casting. I don't remember off the top of my head how much this formation is. Battalion, keep calling it formation, how much this battalion is. It didn't really interest me. I know that lots of people like Arkan, lots of people like Curse of the Years. So they're looking at this because you probably would take these units anyway if you're going down that road. So why not make them better? I get that. We have a General Death formation, General Death Battalion, called the Death March, which it's a rebadged version of, I think, the Legion of Death that was in Grand Alliance Death. So it's a Death Rattle Battalion, essentially. White King, they've changed that entry to the keyword White King rather than just the unit name, which some people who definitely need to get on with their lives were arguing meant that you couldn't take it because the White King Warscrolls say White King with Baleful Tombblade or White King with Black Axe, even though they're different size text and things like that. They've changed it to a keyword now, so that's not an issue. People have found something else to argue over. You've got a unit of Black Knights, a unit of Graveguard, and 3 units of Skeleton Warriors. I loved this battalion at 1,000 points because it's pretty close to your whole 1,000. You can the White King's command ability, if he's your general, makes those Graveguards super choppy. Tons of skeletons. They're quite good. They're survivable with being able to bring them back and things like that. The abilities of this battalion are the same as what they were in Grand Alliance Death. So at the start of your hero phase, you can return a slain model to each unit from the Death March as long as they're within 9 inches of the White King, which is kind of handy. So that's not 1 wound's worth of models. That's a whole model. So doing that to your Black Knights is kind of handy. That's, you can't go too wrong there. And, an extra Graveguard and 3 extra skeletons, essentially. And then also in your hero phase with the White King and all the units from the Death March that are within 9 inches of him can make a move of up to 4 inches as if it was your movement phase, but they can't run. So once again, you can be a bit cheeky because Black Knights have a 12-inch movement. You move them, first turn, they move that 4, then they move 12. So they've moved 16 inches in the turn. And I like to use Black Knights. They're a bit of a tar pit unit. They don't sort of go anywhere, and you can keep them alive, keep them topped up fairly well. And so you can put these dudes out in front of the rest of your army quite easily with this particular battalion's abilities. Like I said, there's a lot in here. There's a lot of points tied up in the battalion. The actual cost of the battalion itself isn't too expensive, but it's good if you want to go down the Death Rattle only route or mainly Death Rattle. It's a really good formation because it gets you a bunch of battle line units. It's a generic death formation, so you can use it in any of those other legions. It gets you Graveguard, which is great now, and drops. It reduces your drops a lot. there's a lot of units that are in it that you will use that you can just one drop down, and because the amount of drops that you have in a death army is one of its biggest weaknesses, and this is a good way of getting around that. This one will make resident Blood Knight enthusiast Deke from the Liverpool store down in Sydney very happy, because it's for Blood Knights, and Deke loves his Blood Knights. So it's the Castellans of the Crimson Keep. So it's that new character, Prince Vordry, and 3 or more units of Blood Knights. So it's a generic death battalion, so you can use it in the other allegiances. You could use it in the death. You can use that in Soulblight, and your Blood Knights are your battle line. All good. So this really plays off that off the lore of the prince. He's got that the keep that he's tied to, but he can move it with him anywhere he wants in the realms, as long as there's enough death magic. So the rules really speak into that, and I think that's quite cool. So it's got two abilities. The shifting keep, so basically at the start of the game, after you've determined the territories, but not before you've started to set up any units, you pick a battlefield edge, and you can place the battalion to one side and say that they're going to set up in the keep. And then at the end of one of your movement phases, you can set up any units from the battalion wholly within 6 inches of the battlefield edge that you chose, as wholly within 6 inches, 9 inches away from your enemy. And that's kind of like them kind of appearing out of this keep that's just appeared on the battlefield, which is kind of cool, because you can do it on the short edge or things like that, and get stuff a bit closer to the enemy. And then the second ability ties in with that as well. So while they're within 15 inches of the battlefield edge that you picked as part of that first rule, you reroll failed to hit rolls for the Lancers or Blades of Blood Knights. So that's really handy. So while they're close to their keep, so to speak, they're rerolling to hit. So that's really cool. So you took this, if you took this as part of a Legion of Blood or things like that, so they've got 4 attacks each, and they're rerolling to hit if they're close to that board edge. It's really quite cool. Yeah, if people love their Blood Knights, so this is a good battalion for them. It's possibly less useful if you're not playing one of those like Legion of Blood or Soulblight or something, because 3 units of Blood Knights is really expensive. So, and Prince Vordry is not exactly cheap either. So here we have Neferata's battalion. So this is the Court of New Lamia. So Neferata, obviously, 2 or more vampire lords. So that's your lovely keyword there, and a Bloodseeker palanquin, however you want to say it. Everybody says it differently. Palanquin. So this is quite interesting because it obviously uses that new model, makes people convert their Coven Thrones or whatever. Speaking of Coven Thrones, I'm a little bit disappointed in the picture for this battalion because it has a Coven Throne in it. Doesn't have one of the doesn't have the new Bloodseeker palanquin. It just has a Coven Throne, and I'm pretty sure it's somebody slipped up there. It I don't know. It would have been a good chance for them to showcase this new variant, but yeah. Rightio. So, what wonderful abilities do you get for surrounding Neferata with other vampires? We get the Adivore rule. The Adivore is another name for her mount. I had to Google it because I couldn't figure out what it was. And I Googled Adivore, and that's another name for her Dread Abyssal. So whilst Neferata's within 9 inches of the Bloodseeker palanquin, she gets to reroll failed hit rolls if the target is an enemy hero. So there's lots of targeting heroes in the Death Book, which is quite cool because that kind of feeds into the Death thing of sowing fear and destroying the officers, so the rank and file get scared and stuff like that. That ability also feeds really well back into the Palanquin's abilities, which we'll talk about in a little bit, because they work when heroes get killed. So you help Neferata kill the hero, which in turn makes Palanquin's ability fire, which makes other stuff around it work better. It's quite cool. It's like a lovely little cycle. And Scent of Blood. So at the start of your movement phase, units from the Court of New Lamia that are within 9 inches of the Bloodseeker Palanquin may add 4 to the movement characteristics at the end of the phase. So if you start off Neferata within 9 inches of the Palanquin and you want her to go do something, or you've got a dude on Zombie Dragon as one of your Vampire Lords, you bunch them up at the start of the game, having an extra 4 inches makes Neferata a 20-inch move, and will make the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon an 18-inch move. That's without any of your, like if you got off Amethystine Pinions or any of that other movement stuff, you know, you've got a fast-moving little hunting pack happening there. So I don't know. Once again, I don't know the cost of the battalion off the top of my head. It's full of characters, though. So, you know, Neferata is 400. A normal Vampire Lord's 140. Dude on Zombie Dragon's 440. I think the Bloodseeker Palanquin is about 300, 320. So there's a lot of characters in there already. You definitely probably wouldn't want to spend too much on characters from the rest of in the rest of your army, because that's, yeah, you're going to run out very quickly. Cool. And then last battalion in the book is Manfred's Nightfall pack. So this is quite cool. I read this battalion and went, I need more than 6 Vargeists. Because I want to run 2 units of 6. So we've got Manfred, 2 units of Vargeists, and 3 or more units of Skeleton Warriors. So it kind of, once again, it feeds into that the way that his allegiance abilities work. He's got lots of death rattle in there. They're going to get their +1 save while they're in your territory. You can set up those Vargeists in ambush. You know, that's quite cool. You'd set Manfred up in ambush if you wanted to as well. On any turn, so you got the abilities for this: Swooping Predators. On any turn in which they complete a successful charge, add 1 to the attack's characteristics for the fangs and talons of this battalion's Vargeists. So they already have 3 each. 3s, neg 1 rend, 2 damage. So 4 attacks off each Vargeist is nothing to sneeze at. I like to run units of 6, which is why I was like, I kind of going to need more if I want to run 2 units of 6. There's a lot of points there, but I think it's quite good. And then your 3 or more units of Skeleton Warriors, that's your battle line right here in this particular battalion. So that's quite good. It's one of those ones, it fills your battle line requirements, which is always good in a battalion. And if there's a bunch of your army in it, it's going to keep your drops down as well. The other abilities, Call of the Night. So if Manfred uses his Deathlight Invocation ability on any Skeleton Warrior unit from this battalion, you re-roll the D3. So that's cool. You can, you make sure that your bait units get to stay topped up. So it's quite good. Yeah, as I mentioned, that is the last of the Warscroll battalions. And so we're sort of on the downward stretch here as far as the actual book Warscrolls go. And from here on out, I'm just going to kind of discuss what's changed from the old versions to the new. The big change, obviously, in this book has been how death units get summoned. So once upon a time, all the death units had a spell, and you'd have to, Death Wizards knew those spells to cast it. You've got to put new units on the table. They've taken that away. They've got those grave sites and things like that. And once upon a time, the banners in all of the undead units used to help them top up models. You know, skeletons would get D6 back in the RFAs. Same with zombies. Graveguard and Black Knight's got D3. Blood Knight's got 1. So they've changed that. And they've got the summonable keyword, which indicates that you can kind of keep the numbers up on this particular unit, or you can bring it in with graves sites and things like that. So what they've done is they've then spread out the ability to top your units up in a rule called Deathly Invocation. So you pick a number of units which is specified on the Warscroll for the character, anywhere between 2 and 5, and they will also specify a range, you know, between 6 inches and I think most of them are 12 to 18. Pick that many units, and then you roll D3. And if they're single, you can restore that many wounds onto a model. So if it's something like Black Knights, and you've got 1 there with 1 wound, you roll your D3, you get to top up that last Black Knight. Same with Spirit Hosts, which now have the summonable keyword, or Hex Wraiths. If they're single wound models, or if there's no wounds allocated into the unit, you get to bring back up to D3 worth of wounds characteristic models. Okay, so basically, if they're single wound models, skeletons or graveguard, you get back however many models you rolled on the D3. If they're Black Knights or Hex Wraiths, you've got to roll a 2 or a 3 to get one model back, because they've got a wound characteristic of 2, so you need to get 2 or more on your D3 roll to make sure you get one back. And Spirit Hosts, you've got to get a 3. It's just how it is. But you've got plenty of chances to do this, because there are, you know, pretty much every character except for the Nighthaunt ones have Deathly Invocation in one form or another. So you've got lots of attempts to be doing it, and I think we'll see a return of the support heroes coming back to death, the way you used to have necromancers hiding in units and things like that, just to keep the units topped up. Okay, so yeah, Deathly Invocation, a bunch of different characters got it, and it's how you're going to keep stuff topped up. So first Warscroll that we'll talk about is Nagash. So the only things that have really changed for him are, as I said, Deathly Invocation and his Death Magic Incarnate rule. So once upon a time, that allowed him to double the summons. It works a bit differently now. So Nagash's Deathly Invocation, he gets to pick 5 summonable units anywhere on the battlefield. He doesn't have a range on his Deathly Invocation, which is amazing. It's really good. It's really handy. And his Death Magic Incarnate lets him re-roll the D3 rolls of those. So you pick 5 different units, roll your D3s to see how you're going to heal them, re-roll any of that you don't like, and you're sweet. That's Nagash. He has his 2 basic spells that you see there. He gets to pick 3 extra as part of his Grand Host, which definitely is how you would probably run him. And he gets to cast those extra. He's got extra 5 casting attempts if he's at full health, and he knows all the spells of the other friendly death wizards. So he's going to be able to make use of his 8 casting attempts a turn now that he has access to more than sort of 4 spells. So yeah. But yeah, big changes there at Deathly Invocation, and what will happen is that'll be the biggest change on a bunch of these, is just Deathly Invocation and how big or small an effect that will have. You have Arkan. So his Deathly Invocation is 4 units within 18 inches, and he gets to re-roll the D3s on that, as well as his Mortarch of Sacrament rule. So he's kind of good for keeping stuff topped up as well. 4 units within 18 inches isn't anything to be sniffed at. So yeah, it's pretty good. Everything else on him has pretty much changed, pretty much stayed the same. I think they tightened up the first of the Mortark's ability. Old wording, you could use it if you were on the other, like your opponent could use it if they're also playing Death, I think, because it didn't say friendly. Now it says friendly Death Wizards. So, yeah. Once again, it's one of those things where they're just tightening up the rules and just adding in little words here and there that reinforce the meaning that we all kind of thought they had anyway. You have Manfred. His Deathly Invocation is 4 units within 18 inches. Again, he doesn't get to re-roll it because he's not as imbued with the death magic as Nagash and Arkan. His Mortark ability is just being really good with his sword if he casts spells. So can't be bad. He's still the best Mortark. I don't care what anyone else says. Then we have Neferata. Now, Neferata's had a few changes. Some of them are just the way that GW want stuff to work now. So her Deathly Invocation is 4 units within 18 inches. So all the Mortarks are the same there. Once upon a time, you know, she used to be able to make another vampire if she killed it with her dagger. That kind of stuff's been removed from the game because, 1, it needed reinforcement points, so nobody used it, and 2, it used to cause lots of discussion about whether it used reinforcement points. And they're kind of, removing those kind of rules from the game. And once upon a time, if you had wounded a model with the dagger, and I think at the end of the combat phase, you rolled above what wounds it had left, it killed it. Now, basically, it's 6 up. So a 6, and that model dies if she's wounded it with the dagger but hasn't killed it. She normally heals 2 wounds at the end of the combat phase, just like all the other Mortarks, but her Mortark of Blood ability allows her to heal another wound if she killed a hero this turn. So once again, all about killing heroes, and that just keeps Neferata topped up a little bit more. Another little change is her Dark Mist spell. So they have said that you cast it on the unit and it ignores modifiers both positive and negative when making save rolls for this unit. And so that's a theme that you'll see with a bunch of the ethereal stuff as well. They've tightened it up so that you can't make something immune to rend and then Mystic Shield it up the wazoo to have it, or 1 up, 2 up. 1 up or a 2 up, ignoring rend, save, re-rolling, whatever, getting rid of that. That's only the domain of Stormcast. So, cool. So here we have the scroll for the new character. He is essentially a dude on a zombie dragon with a lance. He's got the chalice. He's got the hunger like a normal dude. His lance does the 3 damage on the charge like a normal one. He has this Breath of Shyish attack, which I see being like one of the first things that they put in the FAQ because it doesn't tell you what phase you need to use it in. I don't know. I can't decide if I think they'll put it in the hero phase or the shooting phase. But basically, it's pick an enemy unit within 8 inches of the model that it can see. Roll the dice and add 1 if it killed any models in the previous combat phase. And then on a 3-up, the enemy unit takes a number of mortal wounds equal to the damage table. So if it's not damaged, it can do 6 mortal wounds, this thing. So it's a really good ability. I kind of, 6 mortal wounds on a 3-up, a 2-up if it actually killed anything previously. That's nothing to be sneezed at. But yeah, we definitely need to know which phase it's supposed to happen in before we get too excited. His Deathly Invocation is 3 units and 12 inches. So not as many units, not as big an aura, but he's on the front lines. This guy, he's going to be keeping whatever you've got attacking alive. So he doesn't quite probably need as big an aura. So he's got his own little spell, Quick Blood, which is a casting of 7. It affects him. Well, it affects the caster, and you add +1 to hit and wound rolls until your next hero phase, which is definitely good on a model like this. You know, with zombie dragons are amazing in combat, and if you've suddenly got all those D6 damage, more attacks hitting on 3s and wounding on 2s, that's pretty good. And casting value of 7. It's up there, but I think you could probably make it happen. And it's also a good spell for somebody like Nagash to steal as well. So, and his command ability, Fist of Nagash. So he picks a death hero within 14 inches, but he can't pick himself. So they've specifically called that out. Basically, that hero that he picks with his command ability can pile in an attack as if it was combat phase, or if it's a wizard, cast a spell in addition to others it would attempt to cast that phase. So cheeky extra casting there on a wizard that's close to him, or piling in and attacking with something that's, with another hero that's close to him. I'm not sure how you would go with that. Just death hero. He's probably going to be your big attack dog. So using that, you might not have another dude on Zombie Dragon or something near him to be using this on. And if you've got, any of the other Mortarks or something like that, then Prince Vordar is probably going to be your general. So, yeah, it's an interesting little command ability, but I'm not sure how much use you would get out of it. I have a feeling that if you used it a lot, it would be wizards casting spells. Just if that was kind of the kind of lists I think he would go in, but I'd be definitely happy to be proved wrong on that. So we have the Morghasts. So these guys have changed a little bit. They used to help you summon, cast your summon spells. Obviously, with that going by the wayside, we don't have it, and they don't have that ability anymore. You obviously can't summon them themselves anymore. They don't have the summonable keyword because these guys regenerating wounds would just be broken. It'd be amazing, but it'd be broken. So they now have like a -1 bravery debuff within 6 inches. So -1 to your enemy's bravery if they're within 6 inches of any Morghast. So it doesn't stack. That's kind of cool. It still will stack with other bravery debuffs like from Legion of Blood or banners, or both of those things. So that's kind of handy. And they have the so depending on which sort you take, they have different special rules. One thing that GW have done here, they've allowed you to take either variant, either Harbingers or Archai, with either sorts of weapons. So you can have the Harbingers, which have a 3 dice charge and can declare a charge up to 18 inches, with halberds, which is just so choppy. It's really good. Yeah, I see people building Harbingers with halberds now a lot. And then Archai, who have their sort of 5-up mortal wound ignoring, they can also have swords and halberds as well. So the difference between the two units, basically the Archai have like helms and chest armor, and the Harbingers don't. I don't know how I feel about, like, I can just see people who have got Archai with the halberds going, oh, yeah, no, these are Harbingers now. Yeah, I haven't quite decided how I feel about that yet, because it needs to be very obvious for your opponents. And I think, yeah, we're going to be into territory where people need to put new heads on or take armor off or something like that if they want to run Archai's Harbingers. Okie dokie. But needless to say, sorry about that. Scroll by accident instead of just next. Right. Okay. So, needless to say, Morghasts are still really good, and they're just going to get better in the Grand Host of Nagash, and with the bravery. So sorry about that. I'll just wait for the thing to catch up because we're talking about the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. And now I didn't talk about the dragon when I talked about Prince Vordry, but I'll talk about it here. So first of all, his the dude on Zombie Dragon's Deathly Invocation is 3 units within 12 inches. So that, once again, it's a reduced amount of units within a reduced range, but he's not a caster, so that kind of fits. It's still money for jam as far as I'm concerned. Now, I think that's all that changed really about himself. His command ability seems to be the same. His spells the same. The dragon underneath him, though, got a fair bit better. So the Pestilential Breath shooting attack used to hit on a 4. Now it's a 3. Mind you, if you're shooting it into hordes, you don't care because as long as there's more than 6 models, it hits automatically. But if you're trying to use it on, a single model or something like that, 3 up to hit is much, much better than 4 up. It's got an increased amount of sword claw attacks at full health. It used to have 6, now it has 7. So once again, it's an extra attack that does 2 damage by the time it gets through. So you can't go wrong with that. And the dragon's maw attacks, it used to have 2, now it has 3. So 3 of those attacks that are -2 random d6 damage. You definitely can't argue with that. They've made the zombie dragon underneath very, very good. Once upon a time, that would have been godly with Red Fury and all those other sort of command traits affecting mounts. They've taken that away, but they've kind of made the dragon really good anyway. And I like that they've just improved it ever so slightly. They've kept the cost the same, so that's good. I think while we might have seen a dip in the number of dudes on zombie dragons that were in death lists just for a brief moment there, I think they'll definitely be back with a vengeance. Okie dokie. So Blood Knights, I talked about it briefly earlier. The big change with Blood Knights is their banner. Once upon a time, it used to bring a dude back. Now it's the same as the rest of the death banners in that it gives off inflicts -1 on the bravery of enemy models within 6 inches. So it doesn't stack across units, doesn't matter what type. So if your enemy's within range of 1 or 100 death banners, they'll have a -1 bravery. But it will stack with all those other beautiful Morghast things and stuff like that. Blood Knights otherwise didn't really change. Their Castellan now gets an extra attack instead of having +1 to hit, which kind of makes it easier to resolve because you don't have to have different colored dice or anything. And when they have attacks like that, extra ones are always good. Blood Knights didn't change in cost either, which people were really unhappy about because they took away their regen. But when you look at how easy it is to make Blood Knights really, really good, having 4 or 5 attacks, them also regenning for the price that they would have been a bit wrong. I think that leaving the price the same, the cost the same in points, was a decent move. I still think that they're good. What happened? To Vargheists, nothing happened on Vargheists, Bat Swarms, or Fellbats, other than you can no longer summon the Bat Swarms or the Fellbats. That's all that changed there. That's not a big deal. That kind of happened to everything. But they're both summonable, so you can top them up still, which is kind of handy. The Vampire Lord. So the Vampire Lord, his Deathly Invocation is 3 units within 12 inches. Bit of a theme across the different vampires. His biggest change is that he lost his spell, his unique spell. He used to have Spirit Blight, which was -1 attack to an enemy unit, and they just took that off him. They gave it back to us in the Death Mage's lore, but that means the Vampire Lord can't take that spell that they removed from him. I don't know why that was. When they leaked the scrolls weeks ago, like a fortnight ago, one of the first things I noticed was that they'd stolen the spell off the Vampire Lord. I thought, oh, maybe they'll give it to him back in the lore, and they didn't. Other than that, he's the same, can still go on a horse, can still fly, still has the hunger, still has the chalice, still +1 attack to a death unit within 15 inches if you take him as a general. I think he's still 140 points. So, yeah, there's not too much to talk about on the Vampire Lord other than they pinched his spell and they didn't give him a new one. Here we have this shiny new unit that everybody thought, oh, maybe we'll get a new model, but it became quickly apparent that it's just they've done a Crypt Flayers, but on the Coven Throne. So it's effectively a Mortis engine with a chick vampire on it. But no, the Bloodseeker Palanquin is pretty cool. Like, it buffs Soul Blight models. It's very much that kind of, it's very much a buff piece. So it's got the Wail of the Damned Banshee attack on it, like the Mortis engine. That happens in the shooting phase because it's a missile weapon now. They haven't. It used to be the hero phase, but now it's the shooting phase. It has the fine vintage rule. So this is what I was talking about when we were talking about Neferata's battalion. If an enemy hero is slain within 9 inches of this model, add 1 to the attack characteristics of any melee weapons used by friendly Soul Blight units within 12 inches of this model until your next hero phase. So it's quite interesting because Neferata gets rerolls if she's close to this when attacking heroes, and then this gives buffs to other Soul Blight units. So if heroes get killed. So you could use this to buff up Blood Knights and things like that are close to it, provided that enemy hero dies sort of early on in the piece, in the combat phase. They get +1 attack. It's also got the Blood Siphon spell. So you pick an enemy hero within 12 inches. It's cast on a 6, sorry. Pick an enemy hero within 12 inches that you can see and roll a dice. On a 1 to 3, it takes a mortal wound. On a 4 to 5, it's D3 mortal wounds. And on a 6, it's D6 mortal wounds. So it's not super effective because it's very swingy. Because you can do D3 mortal wounds on a 5-up with Arcane Bolt. But this gives you the opportunity to, do 6 or maybe 1 if you're unlucky. But it's another way of doing mortal wounds. So, with all these casters and things getting extra abilities to cast, extra spells to cast and things like that, it could be a good use of this thing's spell. The Coven Throne. So this has changed a little bit because it had some rules that affected game turns and things like that, which GW is writing out of the game. We're all aware of that. So we'll start like I do with all of them. So its Deathly Invocation is 3 units within 12 inches, like the others. Its command ability, Tactical Insight, which I believe you got to pick who went if the priority roll was a tie. Something, it was incredibly situational, and I don't know why anyone would have used it. But yeah, no, that doesn't exist anymore. Basically, if the model uses it, you pick a death unit within 12 inches, and you reroll a hit, wound, and save rolls are 1 for that unit until your next hero phase. So it's a much more useful command ability if you're dead set on having a Coven Throne as your general. I kind of think they're a bit more of a support piece, but I don't know, you might like the model a lot, or like the idea of a Lamian or new Lamian sort of vampire queen or something. And the other thing that's changed is its scrying pool. So once per game, you can re-roll a single dice roll of your choice for this model. Those last 3 words weren't there before. So scrying pool only affects Coven Throne now, and not other things. So Yeah, it's kind of been toned down, and that weird command ability has been taken away. I'm not overly unhappy about that. I don't own a common throne. I have 2 mortis engines that I probably could convert up if I wanted one, but I just haven't seen the need yet. Okay, mortis engine. Now, I've read this before, and the change that I picked up was that Whale of the Damned. Like, it used to be a hero phase ability, and now it's a shooting attack, which means that you can move it first and actually get somewhat into range and start using it a little bit more. They've changed the name, the wording of the bound necromancer rule. They now specify that it subtracts 1 from the casting rolls of order, destruction, or chaos wizards. And I think it used to just say non-death or enemy wizards, something like that. But it was not. I think it was non-death, because I read how they changed it, and I went. It felt a bit redundant, but obviously they've got it something in mind there. That the reason why they've changed it. The necromancer. So his spell has changed. Oh, sorry. Let's go back. The deathly invocations. So as we go through this, you're sort of getting to weaker and weaker characters, which means that the deathly invocation gets weaker and weaker as well. So his deathly invocation is 2 units within 6 inches. So basically, he's keeping his bodyguards topped up and not a lot else. Other changes are, he used to be able to flick wounds onto death models around him. Now you can only do that on a 4-up. And I think they've also removed, I'll have to look into this a bit better, but I think they've also removed the ability for you to take deathless minions on whatever you flick those wounds to. His spell, Van Hell's Dance Macabre, also has changed. It used to specify skeleton, zombie, or mordant units that you could use it on for the double pile-in. Now it's summonable. Now, so that's kind of big. It removes the ability to do it to Flesh Eater Court's units, which is one of the things that they did in this book, is they kind of took out references to the Flesh Eater Court, anything that affected them. But it also means that you can do it on like fell bats or bat swarms if you wanted to. I don't know why, but you could do it there. But the big thing is spirit hosts or hex rays. So they can now get 2 activations and pile-ins and attacks in a turn. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, so the spell lost 1 aspect of its use and gained another one that I think is equally just as good. Rightio. Zombies. Zombies got a bit of a change. There's still 10 or more models. Basically, they got the banner change that we've already sort of talked about. They used to have a rule, the drag down and torn apart rule, where they'd have, if they had 10 models, they got +1 to hit, so that their 6s and 6s became 5s and 5s if you had 10, which is kind of how you start with them with. And then that kind of went up as you, the more in the unit. What they've done is just given them 5s to hit and wound natively as a characteristic, which is great, because it means that, 5 of them are still going to hit on 5s, but they get +1 to hit and wound if they're in a unit of 20 or more, or +2 to hit and wound if they're in a unit of 40 or more. So big units of zombies kind of are still really good. They're still hitting and wounding on 3s, which is nothing to be sniffed at. They lost the ability to merge. They've just removed that completely. I don't know how I feel about that. I liked merging zombies. I thought that was kind of handy. But it also caused a lot of confusion. And there was lots of differing takes on whether you could do it properly or not. So, yeah, they've got rid of that. They've got the summonable keyword there, which means you can keep them topped up. And I think the rest is fine. They get +1 to the hit rolls if they're within range of corpse carts, which they always kind of had. Speaking of corpse carts, these guys got split out into 2 separate war scrolls. So Once upon a time, you just had a corpse cart Warscroll, and it either had the bell, the unholy lodestone, or it had the brazier. Now they're two different scrolls. So the one with the unholy lodestone buffs your friendly casters, so it adds 1 to the casting rolls for friendly death wizards within 18 inches of any corpse carts with an unholy lodestone. So you can't stack them, but +1 to cast within 18 inches of one of these things is kind of cool. It's 80 points, same as it always was. And Locus of Undeath. While it's within 6 inches of this model, you can reroll the dice to determine how many wounds are healed on a friendly death unit picked as a target of a deathly invocation. So if they're following a unit of zombies around and they're within 6 inches of this corpse cart for that lovely +1 to hit, and they get picked for deathly invocation, you get to reroll the dice if you don't like the result. It's kind of handy. And it makes them doubly useful, because I think previously they just had their their plus or minus to cast thing, and then they made zombies better or direwolves better. But now they've just got that other little extra ability that makes them, worth the points a bit more. Corpse cart with the brazier, so basically all the skulls that are on fire. So that brazier is -1 to casting rolls for enemy wizards within 18 inches of any of the corpse carts with braziers. So that's kind of cool. And they also added this little thing. At the start of your hero phase, roll a dice for each enemy wizard within 6 inches of any corpse carts with a balefire brazier. On a 4+, that unit suffers a mortal wound. So if for some reason a wizard attacks your corpse cart in your hero phase, you might put a mortal wound on them. I don't know how useful that will be. I think it might be good against these combat units that are also heroes that are just hunting your things. You might be able to get a cheeky wound on there. It's nothing. You wouldn't put a battle plan, pin a battle plan on it, but it's one of those things. So yeah, corpse carts. They're still quite nice, and they're possibly a little bit more worth their points now. So we've got the 2 unridden monsters now. So we've got the Terrorgeist and the Zombie Dragon. So the Terrorgeist they've brought in line with the Flesh Eater Quartz version, with the way that the Death Shriek works. And they've changed the Gaping Maw a bit. So in the Flesh Eater Quartz version, if you roll I think it's a 6 to wound, it's just 6 mortal wounds straight through with the Gaping Maw. In this, if you roll for each time you make a hit roll of a 6 for this unit model's Fanged Maw, the attack is automatically successful. Determine damage normally. Do not make a wound or save roll, but increase the weapon's damage characteristic to 6. So it's not a mortal wound. They were very careful to not say it's a mortal wound, but you don't get a save roll against it. So if you've got an ability that negates mortal wounds, you can't use it against this. So that's quite interesting, because there's very few abilities that saves that have wound or mortal wound. A lot of things have like a mortal wound save, or being able to negate mortal wounds. But yeah, this kind of gets around that. I think it's interestingly worded. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see how effective it is. But being on the hit roll too is quite interesting as well, because you've got a bit more of a chance to make it happen. The Zombie Dragon, its maw and sword-like claw attacks came up alongside the ridden variant. Same with the Pestilential Breath. So it got better along with the other models. The other variants being, ridden and things like that. Okie dokie. So we're into the death roll section now. White King with the Baleful Tomb Blade. So this variant retains its steed option, which is interesting because they took that away from the Necromancer, which I think I missed when we talked about that. They took it away from the Necromancer because they didn't make a model, but I don't think they sell the White King on steed model anymore either, but they left that option in. They also took away the banner option from this White King. So as somebody who owns 2 banners, banner-bearing White Kings, that's a little bit frustrating, but yeah, it's just how it goes. Other than that, the only real change to it is the Deathly Invocation for this guy. So once again, he's one of those ones that's just keeping his bodyguard alive. 2 units and 6 inches of range on that Deathly Invocation. So, and another change is that you no longer have to have one with shields to get 3-up save. It just has a 3-up save built in all the time. I think that's obviously because they took away the other variant that couldn't have a shield. So there's no point not just giving him 3-up save anymore, all the time. The White King with Black Axe. So the old school Krell. His Deathly Invocation is 2 units within 6 inches, same as the other White King. And the big change for him is the way that the Black Axe works. And once it's kind of like Neferata's dagger. If you did a wound, but you didn't kill it, you roll above their wounds, and then they die. Now, at the so basically, if a model is allocated any wounds from attacks from the Black Axe, but it's not slain, roll the dice after the White King has finished making all of its attacks. So basically, not at the end of the combat phase, straight after you've finished attacking, resolving all those saves and things like that. Once the White King says, yeah, I'm done now, you roll that dice, and then you could kill, on a 6, the model is slain. Like, it's a fairly big chance, but he may not get a chance to retaliate either. So it's interesting that it's not at the end of the combat phase. Other than that, I believe he's the same. What have we got? Sorry. Okie dokie. So, Black Knights. These, I've always loved them. I love them as a target unit. Other people thought they were useless. I stopped using them because I was putting points into other things. But I'm glad to see that they are good now. They are great. So not only do the guys on top have 2 attacks now, which is the same amount as the horses underneath, they also hit on 3s. So that's great. Extra attacks that hit more. Can't go wrong with that. And they get 3. There's 3s to wound if they're charged. So that's pretty good. Their standard got changed, like all the other death standards. They gained the summonable keyword, and I think that's it for Black Knights. Other than extra attack, banner, and summonable. Graveguard. Now, Graveguard got good, really good, not because of anything on their Warscroll, but because of how Deathly Invocation works. So they're 1 wound models with 2 attacks, 3s and 3s if you take the blades. And they can do 2 damage on 6s to wound. So it's quite good. They're very good at chopping through stuff, and they're now more survivable because you can Deathly Invocation them. Their standard changed as the same as everyone else's, and they got summonable keywords so they can be topped up. But yeah, they're really good because they'll feel every effect of every D3 that they get targeted with, and they're super choppy, so it's really good. I'm very happy to have a unit of Graveguard sitting on my shelf waiting to go. Skeletons, they got the summonable keyword and their standard changed. The banner changed. That's it. No big changes to them. Okay, so we're now on to the Ethereal Nighthaunt stuff, and the last kind of section of the Warscrolls. So I'm sure you're all sick of listening to me by now. But overall, Nighthaunt, the biggest change to Nighthaunt is the way that they adjusted Ethereal. So previously in Nighthaunt, you'd have you'd be ignoring Rend, and so you'd Mystic Shield them with the allied in caster, or whatever, and you'd have a 2-up ignoring Ren, save Mourngul or something like that, or Spirit Hosts that are in cover and really awesome saves and things like that. Doesn't work anymore. They've adjusted Ethereal to say ignores modifiers, positive or negative, when making save rolls to this model. So if it says it's got a 4-up save, that's what it's got forever. No ups, no downs, which is good. I think that's probably was always the intention, but that's not how it was worded, and they just kind of let that go for a long time. So, yeah, they've changed Ethereal on all of the Nighthawk Warscrolls, so I'll stop talking about that now. But, yeah, that's probably one of the bigger changes. The other change is that they've all got a Frightful Touch ability in some respect. And the Frightful Touch ability is hit rolls of a 6 with their weapon inflicts a number of mortal wounds equal to their weapon's normal damage. So we'll talk about Cairn Wraiths first, I suppose. So Frightful Touch, each time you make a hit roll of 6 with the Scythe, that attack inflicts 2 mortal wounds instead of the normal damage. So it's normally a 2 damage weapon. So, but basically 6 is to hit, doing 2 mortal wounds. It's not to be sniffed at whatsoever, especially if you want to be cheeky and take the new Nighthaunt hero from Malign Portents and give them +1 to hit. And there are other ways to make them get +1 to hit as well. So that is pretty good. That's that, and the Ethereal change is all that changed on the Wraith. The Banshee got a Frightful Touch ability. It's D3 mortal wounds because her dagger does D3 damage. Her Ghostly Howl didn't change. It's pretty much the same thing there. Wraiths and Banshees can't be summoned anymore. Obviously, there's no spell, but they also don't have the summonable keyword. So my days of cheekily summoning up Banshees to take out Stormcast dudes with their Scream is over, unfortunately. It's okay. I'll find something else to do. So we've got Hex Wraiths here. Hex Wraiths have probably improved really well over the last book. Not only do they have the Frightful Touch ability on their Spectral Scythes, they only do 1 mortal wound if they roll the 6 to hit, but you've got a unit of 5. They've got 2 attacks each. There's some mortal wounds that are happening there. They are summonable, so you can make them pile in and attack twice with the Necromancer's spell. And their Spectral Hunter's ability, where if they move across an enemy unit, and then for each one, each Hex Wraith that moved across, you roll a dice, and on a 5-up, they take a mortal wound. In the previous book, it was a 6-up. So, Spectral Hunter's got better. They've got the Frightful Touch ability. They've got the summonable keyword, and they didn't go up in points. I think Hex Wraiths are really good now. The Black Coach, its Wraith on top has the Frightful Touch keyword. Aside from that, not much else changed. The Evocation of Death, for every Death Wizard within 12 inches, roll the dice in your phase, and then it buffs itself up. The interesting thing there is, you get to the 3rd level, that's +1 to hit. So you've got your Wraith on top's doing mortal wounds a bit easier. I think that's still the same points. It's not a bad unit. I think the Black Coach gets neglected a bit. I don't think I've taken it in AOS yet. No, I've taken it once. And it just didn't do it for me. So maybe again now that it's a little bit more damagey. Spirit Hosts. So Spirit Hosts always had the Frightful Touch rule. It was one of their cool things. Mortal wounds on 6s to hit with all of those attacks. Their biggest boon is that they got the summonable keyword. So you have a unit of 6 that can pile in twice with that Necromancer spell. You can summon them in on grave points and things like that. So that's pretty cool. And they didn't change in points either. And the last unit in the book, the changes for Direwolves are that it got the summonable keyword. There's not a huge change there, but now you can keep them topped up, where previously you couldn't. They didn't have a banner, so you weren't able to top them up with a banner. But now you can do Deathly Invocation, and if you roll 2, a 2 for your D3 result, you can add 1 back into the unit, which is not bad because direwolves, they're not a bad unit at all. Okie dokie. So we'll just go back. We'll stop sharing screen. You're probably looking at me now. Hurrah. Hooray for you. So that was an interesting little look at the new book there. I'm super duper keen to be just playing around with lists and like there's so many options now with the different allegiance abilities, the different makeups that you can put in there. Like I've always loved Morghast, so now I can put them in the Grand Alliance, Grand Host of Nagash, make them better. You can pretty much just take your old Death Army and put it in the Grand Host, and it just becomes better. So that's awesome. As I said earlier, there's lots of people complaining about this book, but they really don't have anything to complain about, really. But it's amazing. I'm very keen to see how other people are reacting to this book. I know that there's going to be like 1,000 reviews out there now this weekend about it. I think it's good. I think there's some really strong units in there. I just talked about the Hex Wraiths and things like that. That now, even though Nighthaunt specifically didn't get love, they might be a lot more useful in a general Death Army. Skeletons are big again. I've seen people talking about skeletons, whereas previously it was just zombies. As the owner of over there, I've got 120 skeletons. I'm cool with that. I don't want to paint any more zombies. I think it's amazing. I'm really happy that we've got a book. I'm really happy that it turned out the way it is. I'm glad that they've progressed the storyline and given us some more detail on Shyish and stuff like that. Let alone whatever is in Malign Portents. Just whatever's in this is awesome. So if you didn't get a chance to watch this live, or if you did and you just want to stick around, you can put some comments down below. Let me know what you think is the most amazing part of this book. If you're going to have a whinge about something, do it constructively. I don't like this because this, and it could be valid. Not everybody has to love everything. I hate whinges, unfortunately. So, thank you for sticking around. Thank you for listening to me as I went through this book. And if you think that there are command abilities that I missed that are quite good, pop them in the comments. I'd love to have a read. Hit me up on Facebook at Heralds of War, or I'm in the Australian Death Group and numerous other places. Hit me up on Twitter at Heralds of War. I love talking to people about death. They've been in my army for forever. So thank you for sticking around, listening to me and going while we went through this amazing book. And I'll catch you again next time. Cheers.